Tonight we have a very well-known couple who really don't need much of an introduction to most of us. They've lived in the Rochester area for generations, have been involved in many efforts to preserve the history of Rochester, and they have a veritable, very neat museum of Rochester artifacts in their home. And they have been elected as the Grand Marshals of the 2015 Christmas Parade, and they have first-hand knowledge of the Parkedale Biological Farm. Please welcome Rod and Susan Wilson.
Thank you, Margaret. My wife is Susan. Would you stand up? So those who don't know you, I think most of the people do know you, but in case they don't. Thank you for having us here this evening. Listening to Brian talk about the radio shows coming up. I remember when I was about a 10-year-old kid. You know, prior to that time, at night all the family would get around the radio and listen to various programs. And I remember for Christmas, I said all I want was my own radio. and my mother and father went together and they did buy me a radio. It was a small radio, so I could go in and go into my bedroom and turn it on and listen to the shows, the Green Hornet and all of those kind of shows was really interesting. And then to find out that you live very close to the Lone Ranger, you know, that was really something. So it was quite exciting. So I hopefully I can make it that night. Some of the people have asked me, where, you know, what's your history in the area? My wife's family bought 360 acres at the corner of Adams and Avon, and that was in 1837. And when you stop and think, you know, Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett and those people were moving around about that same time, so it's pretty interesting. And her family, she's a seventh generation Rochester person. And have been here a long time and have a lot of stories to tell. Then my family, I had a grandfather that came here in 1822, and he settled in what was then Oakland Township, but over by the corner of what would become Updike and University today, where Havenwick Hospital was. And he was the first probate judge elected in the Michigan Territory for Oakland County, and then when it became a state, he was elected also as the first elected probate judge of Oakland County in the state of Michigan. And then my other grandfather lived across the street from him. Now, isn't that amazing how grandfathers lived across the street from one another? They married the girl next door, because that's all the the people they knew. Yeah. And he came here in 1835. The Phelps House, which we refer to it as, which is part of Havenwick Hospital today, the old brick house. That is where Havenwick Hospital on University, where their offices are, was in my family from the time it was built in the 1850s until 1972, when the last relative that lived there died. And apparently, I didn't know that it was available to buy, but that would have been a cool place to live. But anyway, so anyway. So our roots go back quite a ways and are pretty deep in this area, so we don't plan on leaving anytime soon. And we just enjoy and have fun with our history here. When I first got started talking about Parkedale Biological Farm, one of the Boberitzes, and Zach Boberitz, we'll talk about him in a little bit. Zach Boberitz started Parkedale Biological Farm. He was sent out from Detroit, and I'll tell you that story. But one of the Boberitz's, Zach's sons, was supposed to give a presentation for Founders Day many years ago. And Gail's probably, I don't know if you remember Gail, but Gail gave me a call, Gail Kemmler, and said, Mr. Boberts can't speak, he's ill. He will give you his notes, will you speak on Parke Davis Biological Farm? And that was about a week before the speech. So I went ahead and stumbled through it the best I could. But in the meantime, and then since then, started talking to my father-in-law, who's now passed away, Kenneth Seward, and ran across things like, oh, the barns were officially dedicated in 1908. Like, oh, did you know that my father-in-law said, did you know my dad worked there, started working there in 1915? You know, so it was just a new farm, and he retired in 1953. And we got some pictures from that. I'll talk about that story. And then he said, when I got out of high school, I didn't have a job. So for the first year and a half, I worked at Parke Davis and helped bleed the horses and things like that. Oh, and you know, which uncle was it? No, not Earl. His uncle, he had been your grandma's brother. John, Uncle John. John Giebert from the Giebert Hardware people.
Well, yes.
I mean, he didn't know him, it was his. But anyway, John Giebert worked there for many years. That was her dad's uncle, and and there were a lot of other cousins and people that worked there. So got interested in it, and then as the barns, we got involved with the barns and things, and we'll talk about that as we go through this. So why don't we get started? Anybody got any questions before I start? Okay. Can we have the lights down just a little? I used to be in charge of the light patrol, so I know this is a challenge. Even the people that work here full-time have problems with the lights. Okay. Well, we'll see what they can do. A little bit, a little bit.
Keep going.
That's good. That's good.
Never, ever.
Good job, Carrie. In some of the information that you may have seen coming up to today, they called it Parkedale Farm, and I used to call it Parkedale, and I soon learned after my wife corrected me more than once that it's not Parkedale, that nobody here in town that lived here knew it by Parkedale. They knew it as Parke Davis and the biological farm. So that's why I call it this. You'll see some items in here where they do call it the Parkedale farm. And it's right now owned and operated by Par Pharmaceuticals, and I'll talk about that right at the end. Parke Davis was first started, some of the old chemists, Dr. Duffield, 1862, and Hervey Parke, not Harvey, Hervey Parke, they became partners, and in 1866 started the Duffield and Parke Company. And then later on, a year later, George Davis joined the firm, and I'm not really sure when Duffield passed away or left, but it became, that's where the Parke and Davis came from, Parke Davis Pharmaceutical Company. This is out of one of their books, Parke Davis's books. In 1903, Parke Davis was granted the United States Biological License number 1. Number 1 in the United States, not just Michigan, but in the United States, to mass produce diphtheria antitoxins. A copy of the license is on display in Building 8. Well, when they moved out here to Parkedale, the license was moved out here. And I don't know if it still sits in one of their offices, but was there not too long ago. I would hope it is still there. But to have the #1 license, to give the importance of this biological farm, one of the times I gave this presentation, I had a guy sitting in the audience which was a salesperson for Parkedale. And he said, we were talking about the barns being destroyed, he says, that site was not only nationally known, but it was internationally known, that the Parkedale Biological Farms. And so it's, you know, it was sad to see things go down, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. This is a view down in Detroit of their stables. They had an overcrowding. Can you imagine horses running around downtown Detroit? You know, well, they'd have a lot of room today, but you know, back then it was not a lot of room, and they finally ended up to purchase a farm. And this is just an article. I'm not going to read these to you, okay? And just talks about why they're growing, why they're getting bigger, and now they have. It said the one comment right here: the animals will have a chance to spread themselves out. So it was a good thing to buy the farmland. People have asked, why did they buy in Rochester? Now you have a building down on the Detroit River. You would think they might go someplace else, but why did they come to Rochester? They started buying 300 and some acres and ended up with over 700 acres. And you had railroads, both Michigan Central and Grand Trunk ran right by the property, the farm that they bought. This is where the trailway is, the Clinton River Trailway. This is where the Michigan Central would run. This is Parkedale's property right here. The DUR, probably one of the biggest reasons. The Detroit United Railway came into town in 1899, and you could get on a DUR car down at their factory in Detroit if they wanted to send some workers out any particular day, and they could get on the DUR and in about an hour be out here in Rochester. And they'd have to transfer in Royal Oak and then come on out to Rochester, where we were only a short distance from the farm. And if you sent them out, the workers out for a week, we also had 2 hotels in town. The Hotel St. James at the top, and this was a Detroit hotel. This hotel was at the corner of University, what is today University and Main, and this was at 3rd and Main. 2 very nice hotels. Very nice back in the early days. Hotel St. James was taken down in the early 70s due to the termites taking their toll, and it was getting ready to fall down. So that's why I said in the early days they were very nice.
The other one burned.
Yes.
Detroit burned.
Yes. This one. Whoop. This one burned. First hotel on that site was built in the 1830s and burned in 1877. They rebuilt the Detroit Hotel in brick, and it burned in 1927. And then there was a fire in the building that's there now in I think it was 87 or 97. I said, don't lease that building with a year that ends with 7. So anyway, they had transportation out here, places to keep their workers, and it was an easy access. This is what some of the farm looked like. These are pictures out of their magazines, and just farmland. This is Zach Boberitz, and there's not many pictures about Zach. And back when they printed these pictures, you have to put up with the rag content in their papers and things like that, and sometimes they do not copy very well. He came out in 1907 with a circus tent, kind of a lean-to, started the farm. They've shipped animals out, and by 1908 they had all the barns open for him, and that's who started the biological farms out here. He retired in 1948 with 51 years of service. Just, you don't hear that anymore. Now you're going to see a few postcards, copies of postcards we have. This you can tell was, when I say they were built in 1908, you can see, they haven't been there very long. This postcard is marked 1909. These were the barns that set up where the OBC is today, if you're not familiar with that. This is, by this time, 1914, they'd added a silo and a water tank. That's not the same water tank that's up there today. This is from their book from 1914, and this does say the Parkedale Farm right here. And this is you just think of somebody from Detroit coming out here to take pictures of the farm, and how do you promote this? And I'm sure they had just a field day with everything. More pictures of the farm with the horses out there. Maybe some of the Clinton River. More river scenes. And this is where they used to bleed the horses. Now, any of the horses they brought to that facility were thoroughbreds. They weren't just old plow horses, but most of them came out of Kentucky. There were some from the Midwest, but they were all thoroughbreds, and they would take in there and inject them with live serum, and then, I don't know if it was a day later, they would take the blood out of them and separate the serum, and they could then develop it into some antitoxins. They did not kill the horses. The longest living one lived there about 15 years, so they didn't, die right away. They were treated very, very well. The barns that I'll show you some pictures of were all varnished oak on the inside, better than a lot of the homes in the area, so they were well treated. This is another early postcard. This was before the silo was added. Another one, just another early picture. When you came to Rochester back around the 1900s, there weren't a lot of places to take pictures of for postcards. So this was one of their favorite places. Just another one. This is their booklet from in 1916, their Jubilee souvenir, which was 50 years. And in there it talks about the growing things that were going on at Park Davis Biological Farm. And this is again, another glowing why we're coming out here, and it's what a great place it is, and all the people working there. And it's called the Farm of Parkedale. Embraces 700 acres by this point, and hundreds of horses. If you're not familiar with Parkedale, where it would be situated, this is Parkedale Road, okay? And this is where Parke Davis was. No, this is Parkedale up here, excuse me. And this is where Parke Davis was. Did I have that right?
No, that's right.
Yeah, I'm right. I was right the first time.
Yeah, don't rethink.
I'm right. I was wrong once, and that's when I thought I was right, but I was wrong.
That's true. That is true.
This is Parkedale, this is Romeo Road, okay? And Parke Davis sits right in here. another bird's eye shot. Very distinct barns. No, I got one coming up with pine trees in it. Just all the horses out there. Down, now you're down on the level from the river, looking up at the barns. This is up top where the OPC is today.
Do they use the other animals then for antitoxin besides horses?
At that time, there were a few other animals, but they later got into monkeys and guinea pigs and things like that. But their main thing at this point was the horses. This postcard's from 1917. Now, I want you to read this. I'm going to read some of it to you. This is from the Parke Review, one of their magazines, June of 1957. Excuse me. October 17th, 1917, Dr. Wilson returned to his home at 11:30 at night, but was aroused again by Dr. Smead's wife called him at 2 in the morning to tell him there was a terrible fire in one of the barns. 100 horses, as well as the smallpox cattle, that's, they were working with the cattle on that. A team of spans of horses and mules used to work the farm were quartered there.
And here,
Put the mic up.
Oh, thank you. I got tired, I'm sorry. The 100 horses, as well as the smallpox cattle and the 10 spans of horses and mules used to work the farm, were quartered there. Later, investigators indicated that it had been a set fire and was thought that the loss was 100 horses, 40 cattle, and all the mules, and was the work of German sympathizers. Today we'd call them terrorists. Back in 1917 in the United States, in Michigan, because of this event, when Twist Drill moved out here in 1942, they had a fence around the building. They had barbed wire at the top of the fence, and up on top of that building, they had an armed guard 24/7. Because they had this during the war, they didn't know what might happen at Twist Drill during the war. And this is just the horse population, the lower part talks about barns 4, 5, and 6 were built at this time in addition to all the lower buildings. 3 poultry houses, the powerhouse, and 2 water tanks, and various tunnels. Population of horses 650, and they had a steady purchase of 30 horses a month. So that kind of tells you what the turnover was. After the war, the numbers tapered off, but they figured they handled, during the war, or his 40 years at Parke, 9,500 horses that came through there. The last paragraph of that, and this is an article here from 1928, and the bottom part of this talks about the same thing, and how great it was there, and they also made all the antitoxins for World War I, diphtheria, and tetanus is the word I'm trying to think of. Look at this number over here, if you can read it from back there. In the 11 years on the job, Tess, and I'm going to talk about Tess, she was a horse, the one that lived 15 years, that was bled for all those years. Tess gave 1,000 quarts of tetanus, antitoxins, containing 265 million anti-tetanus units that were used to make thousands of doses for the war effort. Tess was one of the horses, I believe it was Tess, that after the war, they had a gentleman who had been given the vial that he was given for his tetanus shot. And on it told the horse's number. And he made a visit to the farm and said, "Is this horse still alive?" And they brought him, they brought the horse up, and this guy, I guess, just broke down, and he said, "You saved my life," to the horse, you know, and to the people around. Gave him a big hug. But that's Tess the horse. He was so popular that excuse me. You're so picky. Yeah, you're right. My wife said only she would give that much. This is a parade in Pontiac, and where they had Tess, the actual horse, up on a probably some wagon, and bringing her through the parade. And the service venture. This is one of their magazines they had. This one is, they have a Parke Davis Review, which was put out for the employees. This was sent out to all the pharmaceutical companies all over, not just Parke Davis. But this is another view that you see from the river. By the way, I forgot, I was going to mention, at some of the sales we've been to, we've picked up different items. And we have some bars. I tried to get my wife to give the okay to bring those tonight. Some bars of soap that they say poison on them. She said, probably you shouldn't take those. And so I didn't bring those tonight. But those were what the workers used to wash their hands and disinfectants when they were done bleeding the horses or working with any of the animals, because it was a very antibacterial soap at that time. They didn't have Dial. Now, when you get into the 40s, this is 1942. Belladonna, that's what was that picture is. Them growing belladonna, fields of it, at Parke Davis. They had a lot of happy animals. And then more of the people harvesting them out in the fields. You know what that is? It's digitalis. More happy food. And that was all under license and under strict watch, you know, where it was being grown and things like that. It wasn't just, I don't think people took some of the leaves home. This is they're getting ready to put it out. They started in their hot houses. This was later on in the 40s when they would bleed the horses. Same things. I'm going to talk about some of the barns that are on the still on the property. One of them still has the metal stanchions you see, and you saw in the other picture. Those metal stanchions are still in that barn. This is from 1940. Little sidecar chute, and they would pull it off the side and come down and unload the coal to take back up. Can you imagine how many loads he had to take to empty that coal car? Modern Pharmacy, another one of their magazines. This is June of 1942. Very patriotic. Inside of this issue is one whole page on how to fly the flag. Wouldn't it be nice if some of the magazines today would put that kind of information out. Jim, you wouldn't have to tell them how to fly their flag because they could read about it. But that's just, and sell United States war stamps. Buy them and sell them. They were an E company. E was for excellence. They got the E award, both Army and Navy, for their contributions made. We have this magazine. We also have one from Twist Drill, and Twist Drill lists all the workers at that time. This one does not list their workers. And this just talks about their the early diphtheria antitoxin was a straight horse serum where they would, like I said, they would give them a shot and then take it out. And how it reduced the number of diphtheria cases in the United States. And this is stuff that's made right here in Rochester. What an impact that facility had on the world, really. Eggs. I don't know if you might not be able to see it from back there. Parke Davis uses approximately 4 million eggs per year. This would have been in 42. Yeah, and then this was for a later picture, the one at the top, and when they're working on some flu vaccines. Polio building. Although Dr. Salk never came out to Rochester, he ordered a lot of experiments and various things to help out in his development of the Salk vaccine. And that was done here and sent to the Detroit laboratories of Parke Davis. And they built a special building for just the production of polio vaccine.
Can I interject something?
Sure.
The basement of that building, the basement of this building, the girders that are in the basement of that building are about 3 times what they need to be. Because what they did, they were building the Mackinac Bridge at the same time, and the U.S. government intercepted all that steel because polio was a priority.
Oh, absolutely.
And they put those beams in that building. And if you get in the basement, you can see them. They're all huge, huge beams, they're welded rewad to them, and it's something to see.
Wow. Thank you. I did not know that. One of the things that I would like to say, and Brian, where are you at? Brian, oh, you're right there. This building is now over 50 years old and could be on the national historic places. And I think we should meet with those folks and see what we can do to help that happen. National Register of Historic Places. Pat McKay, if you ever have a chance, he does part of his presentation about things that went on, and he has some cards from some of the kids that lived out in Stony Creek that were part of the polio test, and some of them were given sugar cubes with the vaccine, and some were just given sugar cubes. And he's got some cards from the people that, some of the kids that lived out there in Stony Creek. This is unloading the monkeys. And my understanding is those were very important to the development of the Salk vaccine. Susan used to be friends with, and she still is friends, but she was friends with the Wilsey family. And Barbara Wilsey was her friend, and she'd go and spend overnight at his house. And he lived...
I could spend the night at his house.
This is easy without your interjection.
But you've got to get your gingers.
This is why we've been able to be married for 54 years. And I appreciate her interjecting stuff. That was cronies? Oh, Mary lived on the Parkedale, right? I thought it was Wilsey. Wilsey just,
Lives around the corner.
yeah. And he would, Mr. Cromie, if I got the right name now?
Horrible.
Orville Cromie would come over and they lived on one of the properties on Parkedale, on the north side of Parkedale. And he'd say, "Come on, girls, some of the monkeys got out. We got to go out and find them. Don't touch them. If you find them, just point them out in the trees or wherever they're at and let us get them, but don't..." Did you ever get into the monkey catching business when you were... Yeah. We went to a garage sale, and was Chet Wilsey part of the monkey group?
I don't know.
But he had a notebook. He had a notebook for sale at the estate sale that just said monkey. What did it say? Monkey count or something like that on it, where he had handwritten it on it. There was no other notes in it, but we knew that it was from Parke Davis. That he kept it. We have quite a few different unique items from Parke Davis. This is some of their sterilizing the bottles and doing some other checking. These photos right in this section I purchased off of eBay. They were taken by the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press and put out on eBay. And I understand I can't use them to sell them, make copies and sell them, but I can use them in presentations. But there were some nice pictures in there. This is Dr. Van Acker. He's overseeing the horses. His son just passed away. He graduated in the class of 57. And I had some conversation with his son. Yeah. But who is that?
Horrible. I
Okay.
can't remember his last name now.
Okay. But they had no signage other than their name on their mailbox. So you just had to know where you were going to work, I guess.
Pine trees.
Why is that? Were they so secretive? Why were they so secretive?
Why what?
Why were they so secretive? Why did they not?
I don't know, but I would imagine having your barns burned down at one time would have something to do with it.
Back then, they didn't need all the addresses we got today.
Yeah, right.
Who knew what they
They were the only place around too, with a farm like that anyway.
They could have put Parke Davis Farms.
This is Adolph Seward, Susan's father, or grandfather. Father. Yeah. See, I caught it before she could correct me. When this picture that you see here of him was in one of the Parke Davis reviews, 1953. When we were out we went to an antique show, and she was off at another booth looking at something, and I wandered over to this booth, and I saw these Parke Davis reviews. Had not a clue what they were. And I reached down and picked one up, and was thumbing through it, and noticed an article on Parkedale, because it was put out by Parke Davis. It wasn't just the biological farm out here, but all over the country. And here was an article about Adolph Seward retiring. So I walked over to my wife. I asked the guy in the booth, "Can I borrow this for a minute? You can watch where I'm going to walk, and I'll come back in a minute." And I said, "I just found this Parke Davis magazine." And she says, "Yeah, okay." I says, "See this article here?" And her jaw dropped open because it was about her grandfather retiring. And I said, "Do you think we should buy it?" Now the guy he wanted a whole $5. And I didn't even try to get him down in price. I gave him the $5. And on the way home, on the opposite page that neither of us had looked at, was this picture. And we sent it to all of his family, his sons and daughter and their kids. It's the only picture they had. He was a very stern, solemn guy. and this was the only picture they had ever seen of him smiling. He was retiring. And it says out behind, this is 7-Eleven Parkedale. As you're coming into town, towards town, it's the first house on the right-hand side. Okay, still, that picture was taken just a couple years ago. And so that's where her dad grew up, and her mother, Susan's mother, grew up about 4 houses down. But he could walk to work every day. This is really a glowing heart of the hills, as Rochester is well named. Right now I have people saying, why are you going to, if you get the theater building downtown Rochester, why are you calling it Hills? That's a bad name in Rochester. And I said, that was named the Hills Theater because of the heart of the hills, not anything. That was long before anybody thought of Rochester Hills. But it's really turned into a very beautiful place according to this article. And you can see how proud they were of that location. These are a couple covers from their Parke Davis. This is the Parke Davis Employees Review, and then it later just became the Parke Davis Review. How they liked the farm. This was the barns. And then this was just a picture of a Christmas scene. What's interesting, when you look up close to them, you can tell that they had a picture of the snow, and then this was a cutout of another picture and laid on top of it. That's how they did things. Their computers weren't working that day. Every year they had an annual picnic, and for all of the Southeast Michigan Parke Davis employees. And they would come out here to the biological farm and have a big time. I gave this presentation to the retirees, the Parke Davis retirees of Southeast Michigan. And I'll point out one picture in just a minute. But this was just them, their families. It was just a good time. More fun, softball. They even had rides that they would bring in. They had a pavilion. Now, this lady up in this top corner, I'm up in the front like tonight talking, and I show this picture, and this lady, older lady, stands up in the back of the room, and she says, "That's me, I'm throwing the ball." She was very excited to see her picture again. But it was a funny time. This is a group of our historical society. This is on the pad where the pavilion was. It's no longer there other than the pad, but it is still right off the Clinton River Trailway today. This was another Parke Davis review, and on the inside it says the front cover, the unusually nice fall weather. All of our falls are nice, they're not rainy. And made a trip to Parkedale a must for many Sunday drives this year. The photo was taken on the back road approach to the Parke Davis farm. No indication exactly where that is. I think that may have been north of town, more out towards Oakland Township. I've seen this silo out that way, and not sure, not positive where it's at though. This was a later picture aerial view of the Parke Davis farm. Now, I want to talk for a second. Not only, these are the ones that were bulldozed, okay? This, let me get my bearings here. This barn still stands. This barn still stands, and I think it's this one over here. Those three are still standing on the Par Pharmaceutical property. We have an agreement with not only PAR, but every owner as it's gone along, that one of those barns, when they get done using them, will be given to the Historical Society. And we're going to move it down next to the Trailway. Yes?
Okay, give us some perspective. Where is, give me a road.
This is the OPC. Letica runs right here.
Okay, thanks.
This is Parkedale up here.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Thank you for asking that. So we want to move those. There's people who think I'm crazy.
More than one.
Who lives in my house with me? One crazy. Yeah. But they, what I've suggested, and I've talked to some engineers and some other folks, and they also, hey, that sounds very, very doable. When we move it, there's cement walls, or concrete walls about this high. I caught it, Jim. I didn't say, I said concrete, yeah. And their wall's about, I don't know, 3 feet high, I think, roughly. 4 feet. And then it's building up on top of that, the oak. But to take a saw and saw all around the bottom, leave the pad there, come in with a big helicopter from Selfridge Air Force Base, because I'm sure they need to have some training on moving buildings, and lift it up and take it down to the trailway. You don't go over any houses, and so it would be, you know, a very easy move, and then have a pad poured down there for them to set it back on. So we'll see what happens. We've been told this past year we're probably about 3 years away from getting this. We at our Historical Society at one of the board meetings said, okay, because we talk about different projects, and we started talking about the theater, the elevator, and one of the Parke Davis barns could all hit us all at one time. So we have to divide and conquer, but we'd be able to do it. Carrie?
Where's the pavilion pad in that?
The pavilion pad is not in this photo. It would be back over here.
Okay.
This would be along the river and the train, right in this area. Now, the other thing I want to point out are these trees.
Where'd they go?
Okay? If you look out in front of the OPC along Letica, there are some of the old pine trees still there. When Parke Davis sold the property to Letica, part of the contract, and I'm going to be going over to Oakland County to see if I can get my hands on that portion of it, but that these trees, the remaining trees, could not be cut down. They were historic and had to stay there. Don't know how far these trees go up if they get into the apartments and some of the others. We've got pictures where the pine trees do go. Oh, that's a good picture. Oh, right here. These trees up into here in a water tower, some of these trees stand today, and the apartments would be right along here also. So where they fit in, we don't know, but we're going to be doing some checking and see if we can find the wording of that. That was told to us by the general manager of the facility. So we'd like to save. Oh, this is even a better picture. The pine trees were planted as a weather shield for the horse walk. See where the horses would walk? Every day they walk the horses. And this is the southwest corner. So the prevailing winds would come in from that. area. And so they built or planted all those trees shortly after, I would say probably about 1910, roughly. And so they're over 100 years old, but they build them so that they'd have a weather break for walking the horses. So more to come on that. Yes, sir.
Salk vaccine building still there?
Yes, the Salk vaccine building.
Which one is it?
It's a square.
Up in the corner.
You work there.
Picture,
Oh,
Go to the barns right there, right to the left of that.
right in here,
No, over a little bit more.
over here.
Right there.
That's the Salk vaccine
Yeah.
building. Yeah, the building. I was called into a meeting out there a couple of years ago. They were JHP owned it at that time, and my wife and I were called into a meeting. And I walked in, and I'm like, "What am I doing here?" There were two guys from Oakland County. There was a person from the city of Rochester, and the superintendent of buildings for, at that time, JHP. And we're going, okay, what are we here for? They were doing some renovations. And they were going to be knocking down some buildings. And they wanted Susan and I to tell them if the buildings they were knocking down, if any of them was historic. My number one question at that time was, is any of them the polio building? Because if it was, we were going to work with them to try to save that building. They said absolutely not, that building still stands. And I just heard that in the last month, that building still stands. They're trying to do something with it, but I think it should get, like I say, National Register. It's a very important building. And you stop and think, I just read in the paper where I think it's Nigeria, where they're trying to get the polio vaccine out to eradicate polio today over there in Africa. These were just some postcards and pictures that were in some of their magazines. 100 Years of Parkedale. And this was another book they had out. This was one of the barns just before they were bulldozed. We were fortunate enough to have some pictures taken. We were working with the Letica company and had a group of community leaders working with us to put together a program to save all the barns that were left up there, the 5 barns, and leave them there, but build in between them, cover, in between them, so it could be used as one large building. The OPC was working with us, was one of the groups that were working with us, and we were, I talked to her once, and then as things got further along, we tried to talk to her. She would not return any of our calls. No, this was Mara Letica. And we even told her we know what kind of money. She was asking $5.7 million for property. And we told her we know that you were doing, that's what you're asking. Please meet with us so we can talk to you about our plans. Went in to Ken Johnson, who was the city manager at that time for the city of Rochester. Told him that what we were doing and the group of people we had working, and told him if he gets any request to bulldoze those barns to please call either myself or Greg Doyle. Greg at that time was the vice president, and we left him our telephone numbers. I didn't have cells at that point, but it was 1999. I didn't have a cell anyway. Can't remember if Greg had one, but to call us and let us know, because we want to take some action and not have them bulldoze. And you see, this is the front of the buildings, okay? Oops. That's one of the inside shots. You can see where the concrete is, okay? On November 23rd, Tuesday, 2 days before Thanksgiving, Ledico went in the morning, just before lunch, and asked for a demolition permit, and they were given the permit, and within an hour they began bulldozing. That one picture that we showed of the front of the building, they took the bulldozer down and crushed the fronts of all the buildings, every one of them, so that none of them could be saved. And then they completely demolished the rest of them later the next day.
You can see that, they took that one back.
Yeah. Pretty sad. I was driving home from work, and all of a sudden, I look up and I see the fronts of the barns gone. And I stopped my car and looked again to make sure I was seeing what I thought I was seeing. Drove down to City Hall. It was about 10 to 5. And I walked in, and they knew I was not a happy camper. And I said in a very loud voice, "I want to see Ken Johnson right now." About 10 minutes later, he came walking out. "Oh, hi, Rod." And before I could say anything, he says, "Here's a letter I was just getting ready to mail you about the barns being..." Yeah, like I was going to get it in 3 days. Pretty sad. Pretty sad. So anyway, we lost those, and lost a big piece of history in Rochester. This is the article that I pulled this off of Par's website. And May 18, 2015, that's this year, okay? That Endo International, which is out of someplace in Europe, I think it's an Irish company, but anyway, they bought Par, all of Par buildings, not just the one here, but all of Par, for $8 billion. And even Donald Trump has more money than that. It will become one of the biggest specialty pharmaceutical companies in the world. And the reason I didn't put this name on this first slide is I have not heard or have been able to find out if the sale has actually gone through, because the federal government's got to get involved in it and everything. So as far as I know, it's still in the process, but we should be hearing any day that it has been sold. My guess is that they will, that facility will keep going. They don't know, but my guess is they will be kept going. JHP put lots of money into that property. There was a company out of Tennessee that owned it before JHP, and the morale of the workers was down, because I used to visit with some of those people, and the general manager and his assistant, and they were down mentally. And you talk to the people, it was very somber. In 1908, they'd just been sold. Prior to that, to JHP. Roy, 2000, did I say 2000?
No,
1908?
yeah. 2000.
Yeah, well, I keep you on your toes. You're listening. Thank you. 2008, JHP had their 100th anniversary of the Parkedale barns for retirees and the people that worked there. And they had a luncheon served, and kids could come. We were called, Susan and I were called, and we set up a room, one of their conference rooms, with all the displays that we had of Parke Davis, and had basically this presentation running continuously on the screen. And a lot of the employees had never knew any of this or had seen any of it, so they were quite amazed. We had an opportunity that evening. They had a wine party, and Susan and I were invited to it, and the owners, the JHP owners, there was the president and the CEO and the president were both there. They were from Australia, and we were told to make sure we talked to them about getting a barn. And when I talked to them, they said, yes, we understand there's that agreement and we'll uphold it. And later that night, we went to the executive dinner, which I felt very honored. Susan and I felt very honored. There were only about, 20 people in the room. And they had Roy Rewald get up and talk. And he said, I'm really happy to be here. JHP, I've been trying to figure out what that stands for. He said, now that I'm working with you people, that's just happy people. And the morale had really turned around. It was really great to work with those people. New company came in, started dumping money in. We had some things before that happened where they were told to clean out all the cabinets in the offices. And we were called by their staff to come and pick some stuff up because they didn't want to throw it in the dumpster. And so they didn't know what was going to happen. And then JHP bought them out, and it was all very positive and still very glowing. We were going to, when we were going to move the elevator, we were going down Water Street, and as you went down Water Street, this is when we were going to move it next to the bridge, and there was one big electrical wire that Detroit Edison was going to move up so we could get the elevator under it. And talking to the general manager afterwards, he said, I sure wish you guys would have let us know, and I'm glad you didn't have to move it. Because if we'd have had one flash of electrical failure, it would have cost us over millions of dollars, because all of the antibacterial and all of that, all the stuff where they're making influenza, they would have had to shut everything down and re-clean it to get started again. So now that we know that, we're not moving the elevator down that area where we're going to be moving any of their electrical wires anyway. So it's been a fun time working with those people, getting to know some of the stories and talking to some of the employees here. And I'm glad you spoke up. How many other people are here tonight who worked at that facility, regardless of when it was owned? You told me you worked there for 10 years?
56 to 66.
56 to 66. But people don't realize what an impact that facility had on the health of the world and the things they did to protect our troops during the war. And everything they've done at that location is just phenomenal. That here it is in little old Rochester. It's something to be very, very proud of. Any questions? Yes, Mary.
So it started out basically as a farm. Did it originally have any laboratories, or were the laboratories all down in Detroit? Obviously, they must have moved laboratories out or had them at one point.
They later built the other buildings, but some of them were built at the same time as the barns in 1908. It's 1908.
Yes.
Okay. And so yes, they were, and it was just a farm when they bought it. There were a couple farms that they bought up.
Right.
They originally bought 300 and some acres, and by the time they stopped buying property.
But they were also doing development work as well as, producing the serums, but also doing laboratory development
Right.
work.
And they grew all their own product for the horses. That was all done on on that property. You just have to be careful. Not that they were bad, but on some of that property is where they buried the animals after they were deceased. I mean, that's what they did. You know? And some of those animals probably today would be called contaminated when they were buried there. But that's it's not that they were bad, but I mean, if you're ever back in there, you don't want to dig. Hang on just a second. There's a lady back here that had a question.
Do you know who the architect of the buildings was?
No, I do not. And it's a very distinct look to them. The one, and it doesn't show in these pictures, the ones that Beerbaum did at the school, the mural that he did, the barns had a red roof, and they did, when they were taken down, it was dirty, but you could still see the red roof. Yes.
I just wondered what all of the medicines were. Can you name them?
I did not put that slide in. I do have a list of them. I do not know them by heart. Do you know any of this? Can you remember any of the stuff that they...
Well, they had the cows for smallpox, they had the horses for tetanus, which later on the horses were done away with because more people died of the tetanus shot than died of tetanus itself.
Oh, really?
They used human serum from that.
Hey, hang on. Let me give you the mic. And repeat that, would you, so they can hear.
Where was I?
You and I should go have a beer together.
What medicines?
About the medicines, and you said that the cows were the smallpox.
Yeah, smallpox, the horses were the tetanus, and the tetanus, the horses, they done away with the horses because more people died of the tetanus shot than died of tetanus itself. So they started using human plasma for the development of the tetanus. And that was done in another building, was put up later years.
But the tetanus was a live vaccine, I believe, because my mother could not take it. She was allergic to horses.
Right,
And
right.
until they got
exactly.
to a dead vaccine, and maybe that's what you're talking about, but she couldn't have a tetanus shot until the 50s.
Yeah, a lot of people were resistant to horse tetanus.
Yeah,
They didn't like the toxin, they couldn't tolerate
they
it.
couldn't tolerate it.
Weren't they doing hormones and things like that?
Hormones, I don't know about. I mean, that's very possible. I just don't know about it. This question way in the back, over here.
In the mural at the old high school, now the boardroom, there is, next to test the horse, there is a sheep. Did they do any sheep testing there?
I've never heard of any sheep, and I haven't seen it listed. Do you know of any sheep? Did they have sheep?
Yes.
Was it for the wool, or did they do
You
tech?
know, to tell you the truth, I don't really know what they done with the sheep. I remember the sheep for one reason. Let me have that.
Okay.
Down at the edge of the property, they had a great big dip tank, and it was a disinfectant, and they'd run the horses through there, and the horses would swim out. And then they'd take the goats and put them in there, and they'd swim out, and the cows would swim out. When they put the sheep in there, the sheep couldn't swim, and they'd go right to the bottom. So they'd have to tie a rope around the sheep to pull them out so they didn't drown.
There was, June, you had a question.
I did a presentation years ago when I first got interested in local history. Some people who worked at Parkedale talked, a gentleman talked about the insulin, the horses, how they got insulin from the horses, from the mares.
They,
And I wondered if you would.
well, all I've been told is they would shoot live serum into them and then draw it back out and separate it. And while it was in there, I don't know exactly. I've got somebody I'm going to take on a tour with me.
They would take these horses up to the stall you've seen there, and they would bleed them maybe 5 gallons of blood out of them. Now, that's a lot of blood. And the horses didn't mind that. Didn't bother them at all. But then when they went back, they'd take and they injected serum in so they could build up these antibodies. And some of the horses didn't like that. They'd have a fit with them.
Yeah. Mr. Ed was out there and he said that's okay.
have a customer, my dad, the store that my dad owned, and my dad. We owned a store, grocery store, and a customer worked at Parke Davis. And my dad always said that he smelled like horse pee. And so I don't know if it was from cleaning the stalls or if they did collect the urine from the horses.
Or he stood too close to the horses. I don't know the answer to that one.
That's what what does Par do now? What do they produce?
They do a lot of influenza, I know that, but I don't know what else they do. They what?
They got out of the influenza business.
Oh, they are out of that now? They,
Back in the buildings they were developing it in and processing it is gone.
okay, the flu buildings are gone, okay. They make some kind of medicines there, I'm just not sure. They change with every new company changes over what they're doing, so it's difficult. But it's a fun place to see, and if you're ever at the OPC, and there's a few people here that may attend there once in a while, and you go to the parking lot on the east side of the building, and you look down on Parke Davis, you can see the three barns that are still there. They're still very easy to see them, and you can see the cupolas on top, and they're very distinct.
And if people want to see the barns, the Pat McKay's video that he did 10, 50, whatever, no, probably 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
They're showing it in the silo, of course, unfortunately, visit the museum, but as it's only $3. And that's in his touchscreen presentation, that's one of them, and it's beautiful building.
Yeah, Pat McKay took the Rochester Hills video department with him and did a tour of the barns before, when they were still standing. And they talk about, you talk to some of the architects that said the structure of those was really great because the upper windows had been broken out, so it allowed all the moisture out, and it kept them in a very pristine, inside, very pristine way. But Pat took a camera crew through. I have the VCR. I don't know if it's on a DVD or not.
It's not, except that they had it processed for the touchscreen presentation in the silo.
I thought I had a DVD version, and I was going to insert it as one of my slides and have it played. But I had the VCR version, and that doesn't play very well.
Pay someone to convert it.
Yeah, you can have it converted to.
Yeah, oh yeah, I can, but not at the last minute. I can't, my planning wasn't very well on that. But Pat should have that redone. If he can.
You may though.
Yeah.
He may have something.
Right, one thing that I used to golf with quite a few of the three of the gals all the time. I used to golf with the three top secretaries at Parke Davis, and every Friday, I think it was every Friday, I don't know, maybe the gentleman in front can, or it was every other Friday when they got paid, they had a store there that they sold their Parke Davis products. And as things started to get older, every payday, everybody got a bag all filled with, I've still got razor blades that I was given, how many years ago? 10 years ago. I haven't used them up yet.
One of those nice perks, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions? Mary?
Do you know how many people were employed at Parke Davis, say in the war years? Was it a big employer or?
I thought it was over a couple thousand at one point, but I'm not positive of that. Do you know how many were?
Not during the war. When I worked there, it was about 550.
Which was when?
56 through, 90?
56 through 90? You were there a couple of years.
Yeah.
What is it now?
What? It's a pharmaceutical.
how many?
Oh, how many do they employ? I don't have those numbers.
Okay.
I did have them at one time and I looked for them and I ran out of time.
How many acres are there?
That's down to, I think it's about 50 acres. I don't know. How many, is that about what they've got there now?
We went to the meeting they had, and it seemed to me that was about what they said it was.
Yeah.
What was the original?
They were up to a little over 700 at one point, acres.
Wow.
Yeah, Runyon and DeQuinder. If along Romeo and even part of DeQuinder today, you'll see their concrete cement posts, fence posts, and they're still there. We've asked them if they ever take them out. We'd like to have them for the museum back here.
You talk about the farm, but there were other facilities that they owned besides the farm. There was a plant that made drugs in New Jersey, for
Right.
example. There's another one somewhere else, back on the East Coast, and I don't remember where. Plus, you had the Detroit plant. So if you're talking about total employees, there's got to be way more than 5.
Yes, but I think the question was how many at this facility. Park Davis had,
You had Detroit sending people up here
right,
quite a bit, so, you know, they'll fluctuate.
yeah, it seems to me like I've seen some figures about 2,000 at one point, but I could be wrong on that. It depends on how many ships.
I belong to their credit union, and the membership of that from retirees, just astronomical.
When I spoke to the retirees of Park Davis, I was very nervous about going in there because I'd never worked for them and just had gathered information. But was very fortunate, most of those people were just like this gentleman up here, and they had some comments, and I really appreciated those comments because it helped me learn too of what was going on there. And they enjoyed seeing some of the old pictures of their facility and the parties and the picnics and that. Okay.
Rod, did they own the property where Cronies lived?
Yes.
Across the
Yes.
street?
The Deans lived right next door, and they were both, Cromies and the Deans all worked for Parkedale.
Yeah, the Cromies lived on Park Davis housing.
In fact, back in Stony Point, if you see a huge clump of pine trees, those are all part of the Park Davis pine trees that you see in these photographs. And they're still there if you go in Stony Point.
Give that lady a microphone.
I was just saying that the Stony Point subdivision has quite a few of those pine trees. If you go through that, if you ever cut through, like a lot of people do, you can see the huge pine trees that are back in there, and those were all part of the ones that were in the photographs.
You can't cut through as much as you could before.
You still can.
But when we were working on the study committee for putting in a historic district in the city of Rochester, part of the study committee, those trees back in the subdivision were identified as part of the Park Davis property, and we've got pictures of those. Any other questions? Okay. Oh,
Well, no, I shouldn't say it's quick, it's not quick enough.
Leslie has a quick question.
Why do I have the microphone?
Because you have a question.
You mentioned the sugar cube polio vaccine. And you mentioned they were given to the Stony Creek students, children. Is that the only place they were?
No.
Okay, because I thought I remembered like from 60s.
No, they were given
All over, but that was,
I had.
they have the card and everything, the Stony Creek, and it was right near there. Some people had shots.
And some had a placebo, right?
Yep.
So was it part of a test?
Yes. Yes.
So they were tested all over?
Yes, they were tested all over in that area, not just that area, but but all over. How many people, did anybody else have a sugar cube here? Look at all the hands. Okay.
And I was in
And
Massachusetts.
you didn't know, I can remember as a kid taking them, and you didn't know what you had.
I don't think they told us. I was in Massachusetts and they gave us all sugar cubes.
Yeah, we do have a picture that's not included in here of a bus pulling up to the old Rochester High School and the nurses standing out front and the school superintendent where they were unloading the kids to come in and get their polio shots.
You know, you talk about the polio vaccine, salt vaccine. Well, then there was a Savin vaccine that came out after that. The Savin was strictly oral. The salt vaccine, it was my impression from when I got it. I got it as a kid, I got it when I went in the Navy, and then I got it again when I went in the Army. And in that period of time, they came out with the Savin. And all the ones I got for the salt were needle injections.
The early ones, they did have cubes at the beginning with the salt, but yeah, they did. Any other questions? Yes? Yeah, middle 50s. Just a really amazing time in all of our lives of that. I mean, we all know people who had polio, and we couldn't go, you know, you had to, when you went swimming, you had to wait an hour before, because that was going to cause you to have polio if you didn't wait an hour.
You couldn't drink out of the garden hose.
Yeah, there were anything that you thought was enjoyable you couldn't do because it could cause polio. And you saw some of your friends suffer with polio, and some of them ending up in iron lungs. You didn't want anything to do with that. So, hang on.
My brother had polio in 1936. I had another brother and myself, we all were ill, but he's the only one that ended up with terrible paralysis when he hit down. And was fortunate enough later on to have some miraculous surgery so he could walk again. Otherwise, he had braces to walk.
How many of you knew Don Pixley? What a gentleman. And he suffered with polio. Any other? One last question. You have a good voice.
Yeah, I don't need the mic. There is a historical marker there?
Is there?
Is there a historical marker at the site?
No,
And
I'm not aware of one.
at the site?
Is there one?
Are there tours at the site?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
We are trying to locate a marker that was put on Tessa's grave when they buried her, and they put a marker at her grave, and nobody can find it out there.
So there is not a historical...
There's not a green marker, a green sign, which is a state historic site.
Okay.
But now, it's better just to go for the National Register of Historic Places, and that surely is eligible for that.
Okay.
And we need to do that from the Historical Society. That's one of the things we try to do, and need to work on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron and Susan. That was a fabulous presentation.